On today's video, we're taking a look at the Transformers Kickstarter Till All-Are-One edition of the original Marvel Comics.
It's morphin' time!
The Transformers, more than meets the eye. Autobots.
Hello, this is Soundout here, and today we're taking a look at the Transformers Skybound comic book compendiums from Kickstarter, because there was a whole lot to talk about with this, and we will explain all of it for you. But the first things first, this is very similar to the Kickstarter campaign that Skybound ran for the original Marvel G.I. Joe comics, which I reviewed about a year ago, and this is very much a parallel set to that, and we will talk about like some comparisons during this video. But if you want to kind of see, you know, the other side, the G.I. Joe side of this equation, go check out that prior video. This is all going to be about Transformers, and specifically, this is the edition I got. Contains all of the Transformers US and UK comics. Confused why there's two different countries involved with the comics? I will explain that as well. There's a lot to go over. I think G.I. Joe was a lot more straightforward, probably why they started with it, whereas Transformers is a lot more complicated, and there's multiple editions to talk about, and there's paperback editions at general retail that we also will mention, so we're going to go into all that. If you enjoy videos like this, be sure to hit the like button, hit subscribe, and the notification bell so you don't miss out. And hit that hype meter down below if you have it on the mobile app. That really helps out the channel, and I kind of forget to mention it, so hit the hype button if you can. Let's get into this. We're going to go over the original Kickstarter campaign before getting into what I got, and then all the contents within, because I think I need to explain a lot of things about these comics before we even talk about the additions they put into, for those that aren't aware. So before there was a cartoon, Transformers was a comic book, and they were being developed simultaneously. Marvel Comics would publish the comic book, and Marvel Productions would co-produce the TV show with Sunbow Animation and also Hasbro involved. But the origin of Transformers really is the original Marvel comic book, and this is kind of the basis of everything that we know for Transformers. Now, it originally was set to be a 4-issue limited series, before the ultimate ending of the series was changed at the last minute because it was selling so well, they needed to continue it. And so it just picked up with issue 5. So issue 4 still called it, I think it was the 4th issue. Yeah, number 4 in a 4-issue limited series. And then number 5 kept it going, and it ran for 80 issues in the US. It was originally kind of set in Marvel continuity with characters like Spider-Man appearing, but later would kind of sort of just drift off into its own zone. And it has been reprinted before, which we will talk about. But for Marvel UK, which was a magazine format in the UK, published weekly, they had to start filling out the comic with more stories. The UK version of the comic would reprint US issues in a weekly format, but then the UK version would have to start going in and filling in its own stories because they were publishing weekly, whereas Marvel US published monthly. So they had to fill in some extra stories. Like this one, Target 2006, is one of the more prominent, more well-known ones. So there's essentially two versions of the comic. Now, of course, the US version of the comic is totally readable on its own without having interjections from the UK, but the UK comic does rely on the US comic, even though they end up being branching continuities because of a lot of different changes. The UK stuff started as kind of a between the issues type thing before branching off to really be telling its own stories, and ultimately its writer Simon Furman being brought on to the US comic to start writing it after a certain point. So that's kind of like the difference between the US and the UK versions of the Marvel comic. So for the Kickstarter, there was multiple versions available. First of all, there was the hardcover editions of what is available at retail. So at retail, there's the Marvel Transformers Compendium 1 and 2 that contains the entire Marvel US run of the Transformers, and that is, I think, already available in comic book shops and bookstores. And so for the Kickstarter, there was 2 hardcovers that were the same contents, but in hardcover. So if you just wanted the US run, you had that going for you. Now, Skybound is publishing the UK comics as their own separate volumes, not the reprints of the US stuff, just the UK original stories, and those are coming out in 2 compendiums this year, and in the Kickstarter, there was the option to get the 2 UK hardcovers. Now, with that said, there was a third option, which I really was interested in, and that was a box set of these 4 volumes called the Till All Are One edition. And what this contains is all of the Marvel US and UK comics together. So, of course, it goes in continuity order, but it throws in the UK issues where they fit appropriately into continuity so that you get a seamless reading experience of the US and UK stuff. And it has been checked by many editors. Fans have discussed the actual reading orders, and it is pretty much as close to as perfect as it possibly could be. And so that's the edition I got, was the To All Are One edition, which came in a big old box set. And that's what we were reviewing today, but know that the actual contents, you can get all the issues, I believe, maybe with some minor exceptions for some smaller stories, in the US and UK compendiums that are paperbacks at retail or were Kickstarter exclusive hardcovers. But with the To All Are One is the one I'm going to be focusing on because it's the one I do have in hand. But before we get to that, let's talk about all the fun bonuses they included with the Kickstarter. Now, the Transformers Kickstarter became the highest funded comic book Kickstarter of all time, beating G.I. Joe's $3.7 million, with Transformers' $4.6 million. So they packed on the free bonuses like crazy. So let's start off with the stuff that came with every bundle, regardless of which edition you got. First of all, we get a Kickstarter exclusive reprint of issue number 2. And the idea behind these, much like they did with the G.I. Joe, is that it's kind of like, here's a standalone issue reprint. You can see it says Kickstarter exclusive, and it's on the old school paper. So you can kind of get the experience of reading it like in the old days, except it doesn't have ads anymore because of that. And in the back, it actually does have a little message from Bob Budiansky, who was one of the editors for Transformers that eventually became one of the writers. And he's kind of responsible for a lot of the characters that we know. So it's kind of a neat little inclusion adding to that. So we got that as kind of a neat bonus. It's like issue 2, because it's the Optimus versus Megatron cover. We got issue 5, which is not only famous for being it's no longer a mini-series one, but also the famous The Transformers Are All Dead cover with Shockwave. I always get annoyed when this cover gets reprinted or homaged without the Transformers part, and it just says Are All Dead, because that doesn't work as a sentence. It's supposed to be The Transformers Are All Dead, because the ending of issue 4, minor spoilers, Shockwave shows up and kills everybody and strings them up from his lab in the ceiling. Crazy stuff. And then you have issue 67, which has Galvatron on the cover. And this is a big issue because this is, I believe, the point where Simon Furman starts taking on the book, writing the US comic, in addition to writing the UK stuff. For other fun bonuses, we got a cool lenticular art card of Grimlock. Goes from Dino mode to robot mode, looking awesome. We also get a really cool lenticular card of Jazz, going from car mode to robot mode. There also is a couple little art prints here in a little nice thing. We got a Starscream there, which looks really nice, and we've got Soundwave as well, looking really, really cool. And then we also get a double-sided bookmark where Bumblebee is on one side, Starscream is on the other, which looks really cool. And then adding to it, we also get a challenge coin, which I thought it was, I don't think G.I. Joe had a challenge coin, which kind of would fit military theming a little bit. Maybe it did, and I'm just misremembering. But we did get a Transformers challenge coin, which has the Autobot logo on one side, says To All Are One, and then the other side is the Decepticon one, which says Peace Through Tyranny, because that's the two different mottos. So it's pretty cool. It's a nice chunk of metal, and it looks really, really neat. So that's kind of all the kind of standard bonuses. Now for the box set specific bonuses. If you bought the Decepticon set like I did, you got a nice metal pin of the Decepticon emblem. And if you bought the Autobot set, you could get the Autobot pin. And these would be included whichever version you got. So I didn't have to pay anything for the Decepticon one, but I paid to add on the Autobot one. So that way I could have both of them, which I thought was a neat option that you could add on the opposite faction. Same thing goes for the patch. I got the Decepticon one for free. I added on the Autobot one there. And then same thing for the stickers as well. So these are kind of just neat. I like the faction thing going on there. And then we get to the trading cards, because much like the G.I. Joe set, there's a pack of Autobot cards and a pack of Decepticon cards. And again, it depended on which set did you get, and then you could add on the other sets. So here are the Autobot cards. Let's start with them. What's cool is that unlike the G.I. Joe cards, which were kind of standard trading cards, these are like the tech spec cards from the back of the old packaging, where you would have a character bio and a little piece of art, and then the little stat reader, and it comes with one of the little diagram things. And actually, there's enough static cling that it kind of sticks to it, but you can see you can kind of read the graph anyways if you squint. But you put this over there, and then you can see everybody's stats on there, which I think is super fun. So I'll just kind of flip through these sort of quick. We got Bumblebee, we got Optimus Prime, we got Ironhide. A bunch of these were decided by fan vote too, which was pretty cool. We got Omega Supreme, we've got Hot Rod, we've got Grimlock, and we have Prowl, and we've got Metroplex. Metroplex is kind of a fun one. He doesn't show up that much in the original comics, so that's kind of a neat inclusion. We've got Fortress Maximus, who's a big player character. Jazz, we've got Mirage, we've got we got Ultra Magnus, and we've got RC, who are bigger players in the UK side than they are the US side of the comic. And then after RC, it's kind of sticking together, we've got Blaster, major character in the comic, Rodimus Prime, Wheeljack, Ratchet, and then we're back to Bumblebee. So that's pretty cool lineup overall. And then for the Decepticon side, we start with Scorponok, which I think is awesome. So we got Scorponok, one of my favorite characters from the book, Ravage, Cyclonus, Laserbeak, Galvatron, who's a big player in the UK side especially, Soundwave, Starscream, Megatron, Shockwave, Devastator, Bludgeon, a major character, Tripticon, Unicron, Blitzwing, Astrotrain, Thundercracker, and Bruticus. I would have loved to have seen Thunderwing on here, because Thunderwing is a major character, and I know he was on the poll at some point and didn't quite make it. And that bums me out a little bit, because Thunderwing is like the whole main villain of the Matrix Quest arc. But anyways, these are still great. And then if you were on Skybound's rewards, you could get Jetfire, which was just an email sign up, but you get Jetfire, and he's on an Autobot / Decepticon card because he was, of course, a Decepticon who became an Autobot, so he gets a special card like that, which I think is super cool. They did the same thing with Storm Shadow on the G.I. Joe set. And then lastly, we got 2 bonus cards, which are in this gold, which are creator cards. So we got Bob Budiansky. I think it's funny giving real-life people actual, like, text stats, but I really do like that overall, because, you know, he is a very important character, or very important creator to Transformers. And Simon Furman, who wrote a ton of this as well. And I like that they're, got function writer for Simon Furman, because he did most of the writing, but then you got Bob Budiansky as architect, because he was the editor, and he also came up with a lot of the characters that we know and love for all these years since. But let's get into the books themselves now that we've looked at the bonuses. Alright, so just like with G.I. Joe, they offered 2 different sets. There was a Decepticon set and an Autobot set. So for what we're going to do here, I only bought the Decepticon set. My friend Hellfire bought the Autobot set, so we're going to put up some images as comparisons. So first of all, I guess we'll start with the short side, or the long side. The Transformers logo with the Decepticon emblem, nice bold purple. Here's what the Autobot version of the set looks like on the side. So you can see it's basically the same design, but just more Autobot themed. Alright, on this side, we've got brand new artwork of Megatron created for this box set. Looks awesome. I love that he's got the black bucket helmet like you see in the Marvel comic. And then, of course, the Autobot version has Optimus Prime. So you have, the leaders of each respective faction, which I think is awesome. Then on this side, of course, we've got the logo again. And then on the opposite side, we get a collage of Decepticons, which includes Megatron and Skywarp and Starscream and Soundwave and Laserbeak, Shockwave, Reflector, Rumble, or Frenzy, depending, Thundercracker, and then Devastator. And that's a pretty cool lineup. But once again, new artwork for this. And I like that the color schemes match how they appear in the comic for the most part. And then the Autobot version, of course, has an Autobot collage, which interestingly includes Defensor, which is not a very common combiner to use on the Autobot side, but I really appreciate it. So we got that going on. From the top, let's actually raise the camera for the top part. So on the top of the box, you see we got a nice Decepticon emblem. Kind of interesting it's oriented this way. I kind of feel like it might have been better oriented this way, but they did the same thing with the G.I. Joe set, so it matches. Of course, the Autobot version of the set does have the Autobot logo. Let's take a look. Let's open the box inside and see our 4 beautiful books here. So, once again, we got, Transformers to R1 Compendium 1, 2, 3, and 4. Skybound logo across the top, and of course the spines. And they're all faux leather bound hardcovers, and they feel super nice. Here's a look at the Autobot edition, which, again, follows the same kind of design principles that we've seen so far. One of the things I love about these box sets, which I really appreciate, is because these are very thick, heavy books. If you have a box set like this, and you just have the books sitting on edge like this, there'd be some concern of the spine expanding and the pages dropping. But they've actually put a foam lining in there, which I want to show off. There you go. There's a foam lining in there, which allows that you can keep these books in these boxes and not have to worry about actually having the spines stretching and then the pages falling out, which I very much appreciate because it means I can leave these in the box sets. And in fact, it's been over a year since the G.I. Joe set. We'll take a look. Let's take a look right now and see how the G.I. Joe spines are holding up before we take a look at each volume individually and talk about what's inside each of them. All right, so here's the G.I. Joe Compendium 1 year later. And as you can see, it's been in the box. I've kept it in the box set. I haven't done like a full read at G.I. Joe because I did a G.I. Joe read not too long ago. But you can see when I'm holding it up like this, you know, if I hold it up by the spine, which is a scary proposition, you can see there is no movement in the pages. They have been staying in place. That foam block that keeps that gap there has been doing its job. I have flipped through every single page in this book, but I find that the binding on these has been holding up very well, and I have pulled these out and read a couple issues here and there, and they've been great. So I think that this style they've got going really works out quite well. Now, in case you're wondering design-wise how similar the Transformer volume are, well, here's the Transformers Volume 1. And you can see, yeah, it's basically the same design principles, right? You got, you know, Volume 1 has your lead character, Cobra Commander, Megatron. You got the logo there, the Compendium 1 written out, which is pretty cool. And then spine-wise, if you were going to take these out of the box set and put them on your shelf, which, you know, get a sturdy shelf, you could totally do that. There's spine-wise how they look. I do like how the G.I. Joe ones had the character art, whereas the Transformers ones, it's because of the bigger logo, which I think they did that, but, you know, I do sort of like the G.I. Joe spine a little bit more overall. And then you can see on the back here, we've got, you know, Cobra logo, we got Decepticon logo. Now, here's my thing I like about these better, and that would be that for the G.I. Joe volumes, each of them had a different color what they were. Volume 1 was red, Volume 2 was gold, Volume 3 was blue, and then Volume 4 was silver. And so each, you know, the gilded edges, the shiny color is different per volume. Where with Transformers, they did what they call an Energon cube pattern, and it's gorgeous. I think the solid color, like when it's red with the red, looks good. I think the blue with the red doesn't look as good. But with Transformers, all 4 of them have the Energon pattern, and so you get that shiny effect here, but you get that glittery effect here, and it's really cool. The other cool part, too, is as you open the book up, the effect sort of disappears, right? Like if you do the, you can actually see it on camera. If you do this, the effect sort of disappears, and so it only comes together when you close the book. And it looks amazing. I really, really like the gilded edges on the Transformers volumes. I think this is a much better improvement, and then it also kind of feels like you're picking up blocks of Energon more so than just a book. And I think that adds a whole lot to the experience over just solid colors. All right, so let's go over the contents of these volumes. There's no table of contents page, just like there wasn't for G.I. Joe. There's just this massive list of people that worked on these comics. But let's get down here. And down here in the fine print, we can see what's included in Volume 1. It's not the order they're included, but inside Volume 1 is the Transformers 1 to 23. That is the US comic. And then UK issues 9 to 21, 21 to 32, 41 to 50, 54, 59 to 65, 74 to 88, 93, and then the Transformers UK annuals 1985, 1986, as well as the Transformers the movie adaptation and Woman's Day, the Transformers special. So all of those are included. And the way it's sorted in is according to the UK continuity in a lot of ways, because like I mentioned, the UK version of the comic would like reprint. For example, they reprinted issue 1 over the course of 2 issues. So that's why there's some of those huge gaps. And so the way this works is, of course, you've got, you know, issue 1 and it goes into issue 2. Basically, you know, in both countries, the same order. By the way, there is no censorship of the Marvel characters. If you can notice Spider-Man around here. The reason why Spider-Man was in the black suit was because Mattel had the rights to toys for Secret Wars, and they had Spider-Man in the blue and red, and they didn't want their toy appearing in somebody else's toy book. So they put Spider-Man in. He's still in here, for example. And so we go through issue 4, and then after issue 4 is where this gets interesting for those of us that have only read the US version, like me. I've never actually gotten to read the entirety of the UK stuff. So issue 4 ends with Shockwave killing everybody. And it doesn't immediately go into issue 5. It goes into the UK stories that take place in the early part before Shockwave's attack. And so the first thing is that you get these prose stories, which was a common thing in the Marvel UK, that they would have prose stories, which are, illustrated prose stories, but there they are, and they're still included, which I think is great. They could have left those out because they weren't, comics, but I'm so glad they're here. And then then it goes into the UK stories. Like here's, Tales of Cybertron, that's talking about Emirate Zaron and kind of what was happening on the war before they came to Earth. So you got kind of like the framing story of the first 4 issues, and then it's kind of like, oh, let's go explore this world a little bit before we move the story forward. And so it's really cool. And you also got the Man of Iron story, which will explain some numbering gaps in later volumes. But I think this is a really cool way of doing it, because then you have all these stories kind of they're not necessarily like a chronological order, but they're more of like a reading order so that it makes the most sense, like if you're reading the entire continuity. And from what I can tell, it works pretty great. And then there's issue 5, which comes in pretty significantly far in because that's all those UK stories before it. Now, we do need to talk about one other thing, which is the reprint. Because there is, this is a point of contention that was brought up during the Kickstarter, and this is something that has an explanation. So IDW was the last company to have Transformers rights, and they reprinted the Transformers comics a few times. The original Marvel books, there was some earlier volumes that had to exclude Marvel characters like Spider-Man, like Circuit Breaker, that sort of thing. Then there was these later volumes, Transformers Classics, which have Spider-Man in them. But they did do one thing that is controversial for many reasons. They did some color touch-up, and it's not done necessarily maliciously, but I think it was done, I don't even know if this was a Hasbro requirement or something, but they wanted to add some consistency to the artwork, because some of the early issues being based off toys that were being recolored from Japanese toys, they weren't super consistent. So for example, Soundwave was purple originally, but in the IDW reprint, the Classics reprint, he was recolored blue. So that way he's consistent with Soundwave's later appearances where he is blue. Again, not my favorite thing. I would have left it originally, but in this case, it's not something that I'm going to lose sleep over because it's not like they were removing whole issues or anything like that. They've just made Soundwave blue to be more consistent with later artwork. And that is going to be, it's very minor changes they do, but they do that. And so when Skybound went to reprint it, of course, they get whatever Hasbro has available, and Hasbro doesn't have a database of the original issues, so Soundwave, once again, is blue, and he is blue right there. It's a minor thing. Most people would never notice, but they did say, this is what Hasbro provided to us. I have to imagine this recoloring is a little bit of a Hasbro consistency thing. It just sort of would make sense to me in my brain that Hasbro would be like, oh, we got to keep our brand consistency. I will say, though, the paper that they've used on the compendiums here, very nice color. It's a matte finish paper, so it has that old school feel. But it's better than the IDW printing, because the IDW printing is on a matte paper, but it's not one that feels as high quality. And you can see kind of like the colors washed out a little bit on the IDW version. Also, my God, this block of text explaining who all these characters are. But you can kind of see that they're very similar, but I think the compendium, it's just a little bit nicer of a paper stock, and I think it makes the colors look a little bit nicer overall. So I'm pretty happy with this as my new set of these books. But I think we should move on. Oh, I forgot to mention, these do have sewn-in ribbon bookmarks, because I kind of stashed them in here so they wouldn't get in the way of the box set. But you can see they have the sewn-in ribbon bookmarks, which is really, really cool. And no, we're not moving on. You forgot the posters, dummy. Sorry about that. Lots to keep track of. Yeah, and then in the back of every book, there's a poster. So, yeah, there's a sewn-in ribbon bookmarks. Oh, that was the other thing. Issue 22 does have the Marvel characters on the cover. There's no Marvel logo. There's no barcodes, but everything else is still there, which is important because all the Marvel issues, we're having an anniversary thing, so all the Marvel comics had this border. That was removed from some printings. It's still here. You still see Human Torch and the Fantastic Four and Wolverine. So, all is well. All right. So, for those that got signed editions that were signed by Bob Budiansky and Simon Furman, they had this, which was, I think, either it was loose or it was pasted on the inside of the book, like by Larry Hama's signature on the G.I. Joe. These would be signed, but they included it for those that didn't get it signed. And then each book comes with a poster. So Volume 1 comes with the Optimus Prime poster. That is the artwork from the Optimus side of the Autobot box set. So it has all of the artwork included there, which I think is really cool. And those are just stashed back here in the back of the books. Okay, now with that said, let's move on to Volume 2. All right, Compendium 2 has Shockwave on the cover. The rest of the cover looks the same as the previous volume. And then on the inside here, let's talk about the contents once again. So we have inside here we've got, where is it at? We got Transformers 24 to 32, 35 to 44. Now, the reason why 32 and 34 aren't included is because that was a reprint of the UK story Man of Iron, which was already in Compendium 1. Then you've got Transformers UK 96 to 104, 113 to 120, 125, 130 to 138, 145 to 153, 160 to 161, 164 to 163, 180 to 187, annual 1987. Action Force listed as AF, number 24 to 27. Action Force was the G.I. Joe equivalent in the UK that used G.I. Joe characters, was called Action Force, not G.I. Joe. Hasbro doesn't own the name Action Force anymore, so it's just listed as AF, because they don't actually have the title of those comics in here. It's just the stories that crossed over Transformers. And then Transformers, the Headmasters, 1 to 4. Now that is important to me, because this is the case with the regular compendiums as well. When IDW did their printings, what they did is they put all 80 issues sequentially, and then they added the Headmasters and the movie adaptation in the back of Volume 7. And for me, I find that to be a problem, because the Headmasters characters debut here. Well, this is the movie adaptation, but the Headmasters characters debut in the Headmasters miniseries before becoming main characters in the main book, and you kind of need to have them introduced before they show up in the main book. And so that is, I think, kind of like an issue for me, that they put them in the back of Volume 7. I also want to point to the fact I was very confused when I was flipping through these, because it didn't contain G.I. Joe and the Transformers, which is included in the back of Volume 8 here. G.I. Joe and the Transformers was the first crossover between Transformers and G.I. Joe. And why is that important? Well, it's not canon to the G.I. Joe book, even though it came in the G.I. Joe compendiums, but it is canon to the Transformers, because in no short terms, the famous thing that happens in this comic, because it's actually, I think, the first issue cover here. The famous thing that happens is that the Joe team blows up Bumblebee, and then he gets rebuilt as Goldbug. So it's a very important story to the US continuity of Marvel Transformers, because, yeah, that's where Bumblebee dies and becomes Goldbug. Now, in the UK stories, they didn't get the G.I. Joe crossover right away because of the whole Action Force thing. So that Action Force crossover and the UK stories within actually provide an alternate version of Bumblebee becoming Goldbug. And so that's included as the primary continuity here, since there's Goldbug. Since this is supposed to be following the UK stuff and the UK timeline, they put that in instead. But G.I. Joe and the Transformers will still be included, just won't be included in this volume. But the Headmasters is included before Fortress Maximus and Scorponok and all of them show up in this. Also, the poster for Volume 2 is Megatron, which you can see here. It's that beautiful Megatron piece as a poster. So that, I was very glad. I had to flip through, I did a little research, but they really stuck to the continuity here more so than the publication order. So for Volume 3, we've got Soundwave, and look, he's purple, because everybody's purple on this. But he does have lips instead of a mouth plate, which is something they gave him in the Marvel comic that the UK comic did not give him the mouth plate, but the original US comic did. Or the UK comic did give him the mouth plate, the US comic gave him lips. That's what I meant to say. Anyways, so down here we've got Transformers 45 to 80, which finishes the original US run. UK 188, 189, 213 to 254, annual 1989. So this is basically just wrapping up the original run. You're probably like, well, why is there a whole fourth volume? Well, we'll get to that, because there's still some more UK stories to go. And so there's a lot of stuff in this, but this is basically kind of wrapping out the original era. We've got Power Master Optimus Prime running around here. There's a lot of stuff. After the Transformers G1 toy line gets canceled, the book just gets to do whatever it wants, and it gets so good because of it. Or should I say the cartoon? The toy line was still going. That's why the comic was still going. When the cartoon ended, the comic got more interesting because they didn't have to follow specific stuff. They could just do whatever. You see Transformers and Visionaries get a crossover in the UK book. So there's a lot of cool stuff in here. There's a lot of stuff I've never read because, again, I've not read most of the UK stuff because till this point, the entirety of the Marvel UK stuff hasn't been reprinted for I think in any modern reprintings. I don't think it's ever been complete before. So this is pretty exciting. Now, adding to this, we have the nice Autobot poster there with Defensor prominently featured. I think that's because the artist wanted to do. I believe this artist is Daniel Warren Johnson. He wanted to draw Defensor. So yeah, this is pretty cool. But yes, there's one more volume. What could be contained in that final brick that's the same size as these, considering that's the end of the U.S. run? So volume 4, of course, has Starscream on it. It's the last major Decepticon we didn't have, and he's a menace in this book too. But let's take a look at the contents here, because this is where I find this to be great. So let's zoom in a little bit closer. So we have Transformers UK 255 to 289, annual 1985, 86, 87, 89, 90, 92. So basically all the rest of the UK stuff plus all the annual stories that didn't fit anywhere else. G.I. Joe and the Transformers 1 to 4, still including it, even though it's not in the main continuity. It's just kind of included as a bonus. But then here's where the fun part is. We got G.I. Joe 138 to 142, which is the crossover arc that introduces G2 Megatron, the tank, and then Transformers Generation 2, 1 to 12, Halloween Special, UK 1 to 12, and then Transformers Universe 1 to 4. I'm going to explain all of this because it's crazy. So basically, what we have here, like I said, is so it starts with the rest of the UK stories, goes through all of those, because there's a lot more UK stuff to still tell. You can see we got Rodimus Prime going on here. So it goes through all of this, which is UK stuff, prose stories, all that. Then you can see we do the Transformers G.I. Joe crossover, G.I. Joe and the Transformers. There's no page to tell you, like, oh, this is an alternate continuity from the rest of what you've been reading. But I think they also know that, people who are buying a $300 Kickstarter box set for this probably don't need the notes. But, still something to be aware of. And then from there, it goes into the G.I. Joe issues that featured the debut of G2 Megatron. Because this G2 Megatron debut, which was a nice arc that Larry Hama did not want to write, and specifically, he did not want Transformers in G.I. Joe because he felt like it broke the G.I. Joe world. And so, because of that, he kind of just refers to Megatron as this giant robot. He doesn't really refer to the other Transformers stuff. But Megatron takes a human character, goes off to space, and that leads into Transformers Generation 2, which has never been reprinted before. This is an infamous comic for a lot of reasons. It was done in the late 80s, early 90s era of like grit and grrr, and everybody's angry and all that. And the artwork is questionable at times. But this has never been reprinted before. There's been some other collections, I think they've tried to do G2 stuff, but it's never actually happened. It even includes a little cut in of what was happening over in the G.I. Joe comic, for those that weren't aware. So this is a canonical sequel to the US and UK stuff, and for a long time this was where the story continued and where the story ended, and it's all presented here, including the UK stories that I didn't even know existed until this volume came into happening. So I'm so happy that G2's finally collected, and the G2 stuff is in the US Compendium, for the paperbacks, for those that are wondering, which I think is awesome. So we will talk about the other sequel in a bit, because first of all, we got Transformers Universe. Now this was a 4-issue series. It's kind of like the Who's Who of the DC Universe or the Marvel Universe A to Z, where it's basically just bio pages of all the characters. And so this is all 4 issues. Now what's cool is that they expanded these in the backups of some of the later issues. They would add in characters that were newer, right? Like, for example, Landfill and Landmine. So they would add those to the bio pages, and they would just be in the back of issues. What they've done here in this compendium is what the IDW versions did, which is where it took what was originally included in those 4 issues and then strung in the newer characters that were added in the backups. So it gives you a complete A to Z. Now, interestingly, it does keep the same thing that the IDW printings did, which does A to Z, so it goes, from all the way from A to Windsweeper. Then it does the 86 movie characters, because in the US continuity, a bunch of these guys only appeared in the 86 movie comic adaptation, which is canon to the UK stories, and that's why they included it so early in the early volume. Also, as a bonus, we have the actual opening gatefold cover of Generation 2 number 1, which was basically like the cover you saw with Optimus, and it opened up into this, which is really cool to have. And then we also have the Transformers UK 298 cover pencils by Stas Johnson, which is awesome. And then ending it off with the Decepticon poster, which looks really, really cool here. and is awesome. So we've gone through all the books. There's one other thing connected to this continuity that is not included, and I do want to touch on that. So while Generation 2 was the canonical sequel to the original comic, and it was the one that Marvel and Hasbro were publishing, didn't last very long, it wasn't the story Simon Furman wanted to tell, and so there was always a bit of like, oh, if I could only go back. And that was Regeneration 1. And Regeneration 1 isn't included in these new compendiums, I think because originally these were published by IDW. But the way this worked is it was Simon Furman and Andrew Wildman coming back, and the whole thing started with issue 80.5, and then it went into 81, and it went all the way to 100. So these are essentially like, you know, this series was what Simon Furman wanted to do with the comic after after issue 80. If we got to continue, kind of thing, where would it go? So this is a different continuity than G2, and I understand like the taller one being the Marvel edition. I think makes a lot of sense, especially with the UK stuff. This also includes some of the UK stuff because Simon Furman worked on both sides of the comic. So it does make sense not to include this because this is from a different publisher originally. Same thing goes for the later Secrets and Lies, which was one shot and a couple miniseries, and it basically like this starts with like an issue 0. Yeah, it's like issue 0 of the Transformer comic, and then it also has like a 4-issue miniseries that takes place prior. This is basically like a prequel to the overall Marvel comic. And so I think that, you know, it does make sense not to include these because they were done so significantly later, because these were done in the 2010s, whereas the rest was done in the 80s and early 90s. Now that being said, together, I think this is like 25 issues, so this could be its own compendium at some point in the future, because I got to imagine with Transformers pulling in $4.6 million for the Marvel stuff, because I got to imagine with Skybound pulling in $4.6 million with the Marvel Transformer stuff, at some point they're going to touch the IDW side, right? The most logical question we have after doing $3.7 million on G.I. Joe and $4.6 million on Transformers is, what's next, right? They pulled in so much money with these Kickstarters. It's so successful, they're able to reprint all this stuff into paperbacks that can be mass market and easily available. The question does come up with fans is, well, what are you going to do now? I think there's definitely going to be more in the future. There's no way we don't see another Kickstarter with this. For example, the Larry Hama run in G.I. Joe, which ended at issue 155 here, continued at IDW up to issue 300, and then continues at Skybound starting with issue 301. So there's another G.I. Joe box set you could do of the IDW years. For Transformers, IDW Transformers is its own separate continuity, its own separate fandom with so much that could be done that I don't think you can contain it in one box set. So I'm curious to see what they're going to do. I do feel like the Simon Furman Regeneration 1 stuff, since it is kind of picking up where the old series left off, the way that the Larry Hama G.I. Joe run ran, I feel like that will get some kind of compendium. I don't know if it's going to be a Kickstarter. I don't know if it's going to be a hardcover. I just feel like they're going to reprint that at some point. But this is still complete for the original Marvel run, just like this is complete for the original Marvel run. And I think that's really, really cool. Now, there is a ton more G.I. Joe comics, ton more Transformers comics to be reprinted. I don't know what they're going to do next. I really, I'm kind of pulling for, do G.I. Joe next. Give us 156 to 300 in a set like this, because I would really like to see it. And also keep putting them in these box sets so I don't have to worry about shelf space, and this is going to become like a nice corner spot where they stack on top of each other real well, because these are beautiful. I absolutely love these. And I think that's my main point, is I absolutely love these. Now, the To All or One edition, where everything is strung together, US and UK, that was exclusive to the Kickstarter, so if you did miss out on it, good luck on the aftermarket. But I think if you do get the US and UK separate volumes, and you look up guides, there's plenty of reading lists out there, so you can flip-flop between them. That's a good way to do it as well. This is definitely the hardcore edition of the series. Some may just want the US series. It kind of, gets to the main point. Some may just want the UK issues because they got the IDW reprints of the US series. They gave us options here, and I'm always grateful for options. So what Skybound Kickstarter will be next for either franchise? Who knows, but if you want to keep up with future stuff on the channel, hit subscribe and the notification bell so you don't miss out. Hit the like button, hit that hype button if you have it available to you. This was fun taking a look at this. It was a little bit messy, so if I missed anything, or if I got something wrong, or if I didn't make something clear, please let me know in the comments. I will try to respond to those best I can. This is a momentous set, and I'm very happy with it. If you want to continue the conversation, you can join our Discord server in the link below. You can also help support the channel directly and get perks like early access to videos by becoming a channel member. Let's give some special shout-outs to our channel members. Special shout out to all of our channel members, including Captain Tier, Spinach54, Masterbed95, Forever1000, Super Shag Spoon, Veloquence, Rogue Leader 2448, Mr. Smelly Potato, Alt Mode Archive, Fernando Pereira, Levante Jackson, Adrian Montanez, GoBro Fam, C. Hoffman, B-Tub, Killer Nuck Tokusatsu, Anamika de Tempo, Justin Giovanni, Sonic Doctor, Taran Tompas, Lupin the Third Fan Channel, Mr. Eververse 16, Ghostly, Parzival Joker, Liam Peterson, Ivan Link, Blonde Snake 88, Swine Ass Temero, and Chris Ramsey. Also shout out to new Commander Tier, Onga999. Thank you all for your support. If you so wish, I'm on social media on Blue Sky and Letterboxd at Soundout12. You can also find my one of graphic designer on social media and Discord at DarkClaw643. And you can find Hero Club at hero-club.com for comic reviews and more. And until next time, this is Soundout saying, till all are one.